Greetings, humans. It's time for Chapter 3, Part 2. Um, we started with stereotypes last lesson, and we just started talking about attitudes towards LGBT people. We covered homophobia pretty much. Just a note on the penile plethysmograph study, our author, whose name I should learn. If I were a good man, I'd tell you who it is. Notes that the study isn't super well replicated, and a later eye tracking study kind of shows the reverse effect, that the more someone endorses being gay, the more the man says that they're gay, the more that their eyes linger on those homoerotic images. Yeah, and there's always but. So I'll constantly be telling you, try not to rely on single studies, and try to get consensus information, a consensus of scientists believe a thing because they have good reasons to. So we have kind of the penile plethysmograph, kind of a single study, don't base your whole life on it. And eye tracking, a different single study that seems to say something different, but doesn't necessarily, because the penile engorgement study didn't really include gay men, because that's not who we're looking for. We're looking for how straight someone believes they are, and whether those really low scores, those 0 or 1 or 2, right? Resistance to the idea that they could possibly ever have a gay thought, the more that's true, the more they're in denial about it, the more that we get that effect of penile engorgement. And if we included a lot of gay men, then gay men might like looking at homoerotica, and you might get that effect. Then you get what's called a bimodal distribution, where people who are very gay and people who claim they're not gay at all would both have that effect. And just not having this population, it makes it really clear over here. Maybe this isn't the best thing to do in talking about a study of erections. And eye tracking is not at all the same thing as penile engorgement, meaning that you can, to a degree, control where your eyes linger. And if you're really mad at being aroused by gay imagery, by homoerotica, you might look away from that homoerotica. Okay. So sampling problems and all that. Good. Let's move on. Biphobia. People who don't like people who are bisexual. So here you're getting discrimination from both sides. I feel like we started this. So in lesbian communities, weird word. It's not like there's a town where everyone's a lesbian. Calling these things community, it raises some problems of outgroup homogeneity. Okay. So it's a weird word, but in the lesbian community, sometimes being with men can be seen as a problem. Well, you're not a real lesbian. Well, I wasn't claiming to be. I was claiming to be bisexual. But you're either straight or gay in these evaluations. So even GLBTQ people and even gay people can believe in the 2-bucket system of sexuality, because that's what we were raised to believe. There's men and there's women, okay? But no, it's more complicated. But there's gay and there's straight. And if you've ever done a gay thing, you're gay, and you're not straight. Oh, okay. I mean, that sounds sexist and heterosexist at once. And so we're resisting even adding that third category, never mind Kinsey's 7 categories, and never mind moving to a spectrum, let alone a continuum. And everybody could be guilty of or subject to those ways of thinking. So transphobia, someone seems to you to have been male, and now they're presenting as female and asking you to use their pronouns, and maybe having trouble passing, or is in a indefinite stage ambiguity. men might be threatened by their own feminine characteristics. Men in particular, might see someone else giving up the male privilege that the observer themselves deny that they have, but know that they have, and might see just how easy it is to lose to lose their man card, essentially, to lose the status and power that goes with being male, that they also deny goes with being male. That'd be very threatening. Be very threatening. If you buy into the sort of hegemonic masculinity, someone giving that up and switching from that perspective, switching teams would seem very threatening. And then never mind getting someone to understand that this person always didn't identify with the gender they were assigned. Even that language assigned at birth can be very threatening. And if you're resistant to understanding it in the first place, it just sounds so nonsense. And then this all gets blended up with homophobia, kind of the crying game. I should have put caps on there because it was a movie, right? This trope from like the 80s. What is it? The movie Bachelor Party with Tom Hanks, and the guy is hanging out with a attractive woman, and then they go to bed and he discovers a penis and spends the next hour in the shower washing his mouth out and stuff. A really, really gross portrayal. Crocodile Dundee 2, Dundee's in New York. So 2, or it doesn't even matter. It's Crocodile Dundee, and movie from the 80s. And in a bar, and there's an attractive woman, and he seems a little interested, but his new friends go, "Oh no, that's a man." So he goes up and grabs her crotch and discovers a penis, and disgusting, absolutely foul. But yeah, the crying game. This story of someone who's a woman and then gets into this kind of non-consensual thing where the person basically it's a sexual situation. A man finds a penis, and that's all really homophobia. It's not transphobia so much as, I mean, it is, but it's blended up with this, if I ever touched a penis, then I would be gay, and if I were gay, then gay people are unacceptable, and I couldn't accept myself, and that's ultimately. Don't get the impression this isn't deadly. Like, the more that we do that to people, the more that we kind of crying game people, the more trans people get murdered. We haven't really talked that much about trans, have we? So we started off with cross-dressing. Cross-dressing was the thing. Yeah, like dressing up as Trinitarians to be naughty on Halloween. Trinitarians, sexually promiscuous schoolgirls is the idea. They never were, but that was just the thing that men put on them. And then men who would dress like women for some comfort or psychological reason. It was seen as mental illness through DSM-2. So like Herbert Hoover and his and then moving on to, oh God, where do we go next? Transsexuals, which is people who start off one sex and have a target other sex. And so, the Trinidad clinic was very famous for a while. Trinidad in our state, not the other country. So men who realize, I feel like a woman trapped in a man's body. That was the language for it in the 80s. And some very damaging jokes growing up around that. It was a punchline. It was a total punchline. But that, the male to female transitions, female to male transitions, to transgender, which is the person who doesn't want the body characteristics, but just the social role. the dress and the manner of speaking and the interests and jobs and relationships. And now all those are like, if you go to the airplane graveyard and you see all the machines we used to use and they're all rusty and falling apart, and all that is really consigned to that aircraft graveyard of history. And now we just have trans. And trans could be any or all or none. Even 10 years ago, if I were working, if I were doing the psychology thing and someone came to the office and said they were a trans person, I would assume, and culturally it was assumed, that there were two genders and two sexes, and somebody who felt like a woman trapped in a man's body would want to become a woman, would want to have surgeries, top and bottom surgery, change all their anatomy, take the hormones, and try to pass as female. Language, which also is, I mean, sometimes it has uses and it's important to know, but also can be abusive, and you just want to be really careful with that language. But now none of that is important anymore. It's not important to people anymore. If someone comes to the psychology office and presents as trans, I might not think they have any problems. I might ask, so what, what's the issue? Is what's going on in your life? Tell me about yourself. Never mind that they want to go, that they have a starting sex and a target sex, and they want to go through all that approval process to be able to get that surgery done. It might not be there at all. Nowadays, you can be a woman with a penis or a man with a vagina and whatever, and that stuff just doesn't matter anymore. And trans is just that again, that whole sort of smearing out of sex and gender. Okay, there you go. We live in an increasingly liberal society, and not only is gender no longer bipolar, but sex itself is no longer as bipolar as it used to be. And so, maybe 40 years ago, a trans person, the way it's construed now, would be impossible, not just because society construed things that way, but because people lived in that society and for themselves construed things that way. And as we get more freedom, we don't have to do those construals. And okay, this is America. Do what you want. Okay, so back to the thing about GLBT people and stereotyping. I kind of talked about this in the preface lecture. Just the innate characteristic problem. Is this, were we born this way, as the Lady Gaga song would say, born this way? And if you're born this way, then people are more accepting. People view LGBT people more favorably if the observer believes it's an immutable characteristic, and less favorably if it's believed to be a choice, a chosen behavior. Yeah, it's more true than false that it's an innate characteristic, right? It's more false than true that it's a chosen set of behaviors. Yeah. What if it were false? What if it were false? What if gay were a choice? Would that justify putting people in jail? What if it were a sexual preference? Could you be jailed for that preference more than you could be jailed for that orientation? Right? This is it's a false flag. It's a distractor. You're the bull, and they've got you charging at the cape instead of the guy with the spear. Listen, more true than false. It's certainly much more a biological thing than it is a choice or a sociological thing. But are we here to say that no women in all of history ever chose to be a lesbian because she hated men? Ever? Never? Don't you have the right to? If men make you mad, don't you have the right to seek comfort and relationship in the arms of women? Are you not a true lesbian because you chose it? I'm not saying it's common even. But if this were the case, isn't this a conservative issue? Conservatives used to be the liberals in this country. Law and order, equal protection under the law, equal application, justice is blind. The most freedom for the most people. Conservatives used to be the liberals. This is a liberal, libertarian issue. Aren't you free? If you wanted to be gay, shouldn't you be allowed to? So go back to that thing I was saying earlier. You're not free to pay taxes. You must pay taxes. You must. So right now, maybe you can't imagine a set of circumstances in which you'd want to be gay. Or do a gay thing. A gay behavior, whatever that means. Failure to take the hypothetical seriously. This is low-level reasoning. It's problematic when we're doing moral reasoning. The inability to think in hypotheticals is the inability to think morally at all. You think categorically, and categories just steamroll people. You're not free to pay taxes. You're not free to die, and you're not free to be straight. You must be straight. You're not free to be heterosexual unless I am free to be homosexual. And just meditate on that for a while. This is freedom. It's freedom not only for, if you happen to be cishet, freedom for people who are not like you is literally freedom for you. None of us is free until all of us are free. There you go. Think about it. Hate for people by category is really tied to religious conservatism. I mean fundamentalism. Fundamentalism, religious or political or scientific or whatever, it's when you start with your conclusion and then work backwards through your facts, only accepting those facts that support your conclusion. And then all sorts of mental gymnastics and whatever to get to that conclusion. So religious conservatism and right-wing politics, which is also fundamentalist. Doing anything to support the conclusion, whatever crazy lie you need to tell to excuse belief in this thing. Both religious conservatives and right-wing politicians and political right-wing voters share in common this stuff. Number one, a tendency to be fearful. We have neuro data on this. We measure people's brains while they're thinking through political issues, and people who vote left or progressive or liberal use a smaller amount of their brain than people who vote right or conservative. And that sounds really bad for the people voting liberal until you know how brains work. The liberal voter, the progressive voter's brain activity is in the frontal lobe, where we do reason and logic and think things through. And the conservative voter is using their limbic system as well as their frontal lobe. The limbic system is fear and anger and hate. So that's why the right always wants us talking about abortions and rape and incest and Muslim terrorists celebrating on the rooftops and socialism and Hitler and Stalin. Because you get that limbic system going, and then you get the frontal lobe acting not logically, but rationally, as in rationalizing the stuff that the limbic system is telling it to do. Back rationalizing decisions that the low brain, the fearful brain, already made. I know that, science knows that, psychology knows that, and conservative politicians know it. That's why they talk the way that they do. That's why after the 9/11 attacks, Rudy Giuliani said 9/11 in every third sentence. It's the mayor in 9/11. And that's why there were the Twin Towers at the Republican National Convention, the pictures of the Twin Towers being struck by aircraft on either side of the stage. So there's that, the tendency to fear, and also the tendency to be blind to nuance. That is categorical thinking. You know, it's pink or it's gray, and that's it. And there's no middle ground, right? It's male, female, man, woman, straight, gay. That's all conservative thinking. In other words, discomfort with ambiguity. And these are facts. Hating gay people is not exclusively a conservative thing, but statistically, there's a strong central tendency in hating trans people and hating Black people and hating people of a political orientation. These days, that might not be as true as it used to be because the right has acted so antagonistically towards the left. Good. Stereotyping. So we started this. And as I was putting this lesson together, I realized we had started it. So a stereotype is a belief about a person based on their perceived membership in a group. Oh, you're white, therefore you must be a racist. Well, that would be a stereotype. How much that carries out and carries over in reality, you know, some stereotypes, in every stereotype, there's a grain of truth. There's a perception that started it. Yeah. Autistic people are really smart. Autism is a superpower. These are positive stereotypes. And positive stereotypes are stereotypes. It's not true that autistic people are really smart. That's a stereotype that you have. And it comes from somewhere. It comes from the autistic people you know who can talk to you about it are probably very smart. It takes a lot of intelligence to be able to talk about it. But I know a lot of autistic people, and they're no smarter than average. Some of the autistic people I know are dumb as shit. And some are mentally retarded. They experience mental retardation. It doesn't correlate. Autism doesn't correlate to intelligence. Sorry. Sorry, not sorry. It's not a thing. So, good. Some stereotypes, and we focus specifically on the GLBT. I'm going to keep changing up the order of those letters. Okay. Lesbian women, society thinks are masculine, and gay men, society thinks are feminine. And stereotypes have hearts. They have some basis in perception, if not in reality, right? So if you go to a gay pride parade, the men who you see at the gay pride parade are likely to behave in very feminine manners. They're likely to be very flamboyant. Really not just breaking the gender rules, but attacking the gender rules. So you might get the impression but you don't see everybody. You don't see everybody. So many gay men aren't out and just hang out in society and they're next to you and they're not feminine at all and have no stereotype behavior, just like everybody else. Okay? And it's cultural. Or, as I've tried to communicate, there are cultural elements to gay. Gay in America means something, and it's kind of specific, if not really in words that much yet. So if you go south of the border, you might find that only the man being penetrated is seen as gay. Man on man sex, only the man. Yeah, that's probably the cleanest way to say it. The man doing the penetrating, though, is macho. Penetrating another man has nothing to do with your sexuality. Being penetrated, though, does in certain times and places on Earth. This thing that we see lesbian women as more masculine and gay men as feminine, independent of their characteristics, we can do this in two different ways. Number one is I'm going to show a film of two men interacting. I'm going to show it to various people. We're going to call them groups, but they view it one at a time in isolation. Okay. And I'm going to tell the observers which of the men interacting is gay. They just have neutral lines, and neither is really more aggressive or assertive than the other. And half the time I'm going to tell the observers it's man one, and half the time I'm going to tell observers it's man two. And then I'm going to ask the observers to rate how masculine they think each man is. And when they think one of the men is gay, they're not. It's just a thing I told them. Or if they are, I don't know about it. They tend to rate the man they think is gay as less masculine. Or I could show two people interacting and have one act more dominant than the other. That is, more aggressive, talk more, talk over the other person, have a manlier stance, whatever that means. I could have two productions of this. So there's two actors, and each actor, half the time, reads the script where they're acting in a dominant fashion. So I know it's nothing innate to either of the actors, right? That's a control. And then I ask my participants who have seen one or the other of the films, one at a time, who they think is the gay man. And the man behaving less assertively, less dominant, that's who they think is gay. So in either case, people tend to see the gay male as more feminine. We could do the same thing with lesbian women. Either way, we get the same kinds of results. Bisexual people seem to be legitimately bisexual. I don't have a lot of challenge for this or a lot of reason to challenge it. I just want you to know that kind of the labels that we put on things matter. The way that we teach people to express what's going on inside of them matters. So this category of bisexual, ultimately, it probably is also relegated to that sort of dustbin of history. It's another airplane breaking down in that field of broken down airplanes. And if that's your identity now, great. This is America. Do what you want. I have no particular criticism of that. Except, but people act the way that they think. We pick up our roles and our labels and so on from society, and then we conform to those. What do I mean? I mean, how does a depressed person act? And what is post-traumatic stress disorder? And what is anorexia? Grab a book. It's called Crazy Like Us. The author is Ethan Waters. So if you have just like a bunch of time on your hands and nothing to read, like a college student never experiences, Grab, especially if you're doing psychology, grab that book. And it really is about how drug companies created depression as we understand it, which doesn't mean that people experiencing depression don't have the symptoms that they present with. It's that we can influence people to behave in categorical ways, and then they express their distress in those categorical ways. And we express our sexuality in those ways, and our politics in those ways, and our religion in those ways, and everything. So bisexual is from a time and a place, and maybe it's always with us, and a shrinking number of people identify with it. Because remember, we start with two poles, gay and straight, and then we add that third category. We start with two sexes, man and woman, male and female, and then we get intersexed, right? Starting with hermaphroditic. That's the first one, hermaphrodites, which is now a bad word, and you just be super careful about using it. And then intersex covers like all of this territory in between. We just smear things. We realize we've been reifying things, and then we smear them. Freddie Mercury was not gay. Lead singer of Queen. Adam Lambert took over, in my mind, somewhat recently. For you, maybe a long time ago. Freddie Mercury was not gay. Freddie Mercury was bisexual. So there's this phenomenon of just disappearing, making invisible bisexual people. Freddie Mercury definitively had some same-sex relationships, and also a ton of opposite-sex relationships. And if he was still around, he'd probably be pansexual, because he just wanted to have a good time. He loved you and he wanted to have fun with you, and sex was part of that fun. But at the time, that was the language that we had, and the language kind of creates the behavior and the identity, and Freddie was bi. Let's don't disappear him. Pansexual, since I mentioned it. I haven't seen pansexual in the text yet. And this might be evolving, like language changes. But right now, what it means is we're attracted to people, and that the sex or the gender of the person just doesn't matter. It's not that we're attracted to men and women. It's that we've acknowledged this spread, this smear of possible sexes and sexualities and genders and gender expressions, and just don't care about it. Like Freddie, the pan person loves you and wants to have fun with you, and if sex is part of that fun, it doesn't matter sort of what toys you bring. Just bring some toys, right? So the cis or trans status wouldn't be very important. And if you're a woman with a penis, that's just not important. If they like you, they like you. And the gender conformity, if you have male sex organs and present female, just don't care. Whatever's fun, that would be pan. Okay. Can GLBT persons be prejudiced against straight people? Sure. But those are much more likely to be justified perceptions. So when we ask gay, lesbian, bisexual, trans people about cishet people, the answers we get back just really aren't that flattering. They think we're all homophobic, macho, and oversexed. Even the women, homophobic, macho, and oversexed. But they've had a lot of experience that would tend to confirm those prejudices. Okay, let's get to representation. Representation matters. Why would segments of the right wing be really mad at Star Wars movies for including Black people and women, or at least say they're really mad and do a bunch of trolling and get people arguing about it. Why? Because this is a part of a right-wing society, and culture war, if you can get people culture warring and get those limbic systems activated, then they'll vote against the libtards who want a gay socialist society, and reason just breaks down. Now we're fighting and we're on teams and we're voting based on what team we're on instead of like what makes sense politically and as policy matters, where we all kind of agree on that. Like 80% of people on most policy matters are in agreement. So culture war keeps people divided. So they stir the pot on this stuff. So representation matters. How we see each other matters. Girls seeing women in leadership positions matters to their ability to form goals and dreams and ambitions. And it matters for boys to see women in leadership positions. So it's normal, and that girl in 4th grade or whatever stepping out of type isn't anymore stepping out of type, because we've changed what type is. So I don't have time for this whole list in detail. Happy to talk about it more if someone has questions at maybe a different time. Step 1 is just invisibility. Yeah, so we're doing stage plays in the time of Shakespeare. Women aren't there. We're making movies, film cameras have been invented, and there are no women in movies. Maybe in private movies, in public movies, no women. Stage 2 would just be hostility. Oh, hashtag Oscars so white. Stage 2 would be hostility. So we present people, but only as stereotypes, right? So this is minstrels in blackface and not actual Black people playing actual Black roles. And when women are in silent film, they're naked, and so on. Women in Shakespearean time, when they had a role, were played by men, not by women. Because a woman on the stage, everyone would have an orgy and go to hell. We move up from there to tokenism, where we've started to realize, Black people are 14% of society. Why aren't they in this? Why is this whole cast white? Women are 50% of society. Why is only one woman on the screen with 14 men? Monuments men. Interesting. And so we start putting people in films and novels and so on, but not with any speaking lines. They're in the background so we can say we did it. There are no Black people in your movie. No, look here, in scene 4 in the background, there's one. Woo! Present. So now we're starting to get speaking lines, and there's some subcategories here. Do I have time? Maybe, because of the stuff I'm saying about positive stereotypes. So here's your autistic or otherwise disabled person, but with superpowers. So is the movie with the kid who's a code breaker, autistic kid who's a natural code breaker, and Bruce Willis has to rescue him. Shown in unduly positive light, right? Like impossibly positive light. What else is in here? The magical Negro. What's the thing with the golf and Will Smith is the Black man with magical powers to make the white man play better golf or whatever it is, right? Just not realistically portrayed, unduly positive portrayal, in part because of fear of backlash, in part to try and change perceptions and overcome a stereotype. So we're getting better as we move maybe you'd prefer invisibility to hostility. I'll grant you there it's not clear that it's getting better. But this gradual improvement over time, present is better than token. It does the work. But even better than that is represented. So now we're prominent in the story. We have a seat at the table. That is, there are roles, and they're roles with meat on them. This is Sigourney Weaver in Alien, right? Suddenly there's a female character who's not a stereotype. And that character is developed and played by people who belong to that group. So, God, I've lost his name. He's on Fear the Walking Dead. He's on one of the NCIS New Orleans, and he uses he hurt himself in a motorcycle wreck. So he's in movies, able-bodied until that time, and then he gets back in film and television, and it's a disabled guy playing a disabled guy, uses a wheelchair to ambulate. Okay, now we have people within that group playing people in that group, right? Which is the opposite of blackface or men in dresses playing women. And we get consultation and sensitivity readers on the scripts. Okay, now we have representation. Bam. Okay. And like the top level here would be inclusion. So when we're included, people of the given group are helping with the storyboarding, the development, the funding, and get a share in the profits. These roles are paid. They're the producer, and so they profit from the movie, a share in the company. So that's not just a seat at the table, that's a slice of the pie. Which means that we're not motivated to make money on the backs of the characters, selling them to an audience who's not those characters. There's women in comic books being presented as overtly sexual. Even in the superhero role, they're there mostly to look sexual because young men are reading those comic books, not young women. But when women are doing all this stuff, the funding and the development and the sales and the marketing and making the money, they're marketing more towards women and girls as well as men. And so that portrayal that stereotyping starts to go away. Representation matters. And the people who oppose representation have political goals in mind. Why would you not want people to have a seat at the table and a slice of the pie? Why would you want inequity? For reasons. So representation for GLBTQIA+ has really, really changed really fast. Over the last 3 decades, we've gotten more social change for this group, these groups, of people, than really for any other minority group ever before in the history of America. Just to grudgingly put slavery aside, took years of civil war and hundreds of thousands of lives. And for this group, we've gotten change, lots of change, really fast. In large part, children and gender stereotypes. Where do children get them? What is the process and the order? Basically, as soon as children are able to reach for objects, the reaching or differential looking paradigm basically prefers stereotyped toys from that time. Girls prefer, dolls and horses and bright colors, bright soft colors, and boys prefer things with moving parts, mechanical and non-person things. Does that make that independent of culture and pure biology? Not necessarily. It makes it more biology than at other ages. Like biology is going to be your ascendant factor. And so Like the thesis here is going to be, this stuff is biologically based, but then amplified, because we tend to take whatever's going on in our culture and glorify it and rationalize it as true and good and right, and everything else is bad. And this part's not in our book, but it's certainly in the other books that I teach out of, and it's in the literature. So here's the 3 stages that our book's going to talk about. So by age, 2 or 2.5, 31 months, a little earlier for girls, a little later for boys, children will tell you that the toys they like are for their gender. So if a girl's playing with a basketball, she'll tell you this is a girl's toy, and vice versa. Yeah, for another time. And we'll like toys that we say are for their gender. So if we have a basketball, clearly a gender neutral toy, and we say this toy is for boys, but this other toy, this teddy bear, is for girls, then girls will pick up the teddy bear and boys will pick up the ball, and they'll like it better. By 5, children kind of have trouble with individuating information. So your hypothetical girl, who is Hannah, if Hannah likes fire trucks, and then we ask children whether she'd like the baby doll or the handgun, the toy rifle, let's say, then they will continue to say Hannah would probably like the baby doll because Hannah's a girl. It's hard for them to conceptualize that Hannah has one non-typed interest and therefore would probably have more non-typed interests. And then by 7 or 8 or so, children are able to do more of that individuating, treat people as that individual rather than purely as their categorical stereotype. Does that mean that we're free of the stereotypes? Absolutely not. It's just that they're going to give Hannah a new stereotype, tomboy. Well, Hannah's a tomboy, and tomboys like climbing trees and doing boy stuff. Hannah likes boy stuff. And here's our list of stereotype boy stuff. Hannah would like all that stuff. Hannah might not. Why stereotypes? Stereotypes are useful. Okay. And in a complicated, fast-moving world, stereotypes allow you to make really snap judgments. And stereotypes are really what you'd expect to see from an organism that evolved here in the world, liking people who are more like us and disliking people who are less like us, and having really easy ways to tell who is us and who is them. Well, that protects our genetic heritage. So an organism acting on its genetic basis, evolving and competing, I mean, you'd expect the kinds of bigoted, prejudiced, stereotype stuff that we do. And just be careful, as I said in a previous lecture, what's natural is not necessarily what's good. Good, moral, that's a separate category that has nothing to do with what's natural. Nature is harsh and terrifying and cannot in any way be glorified as good. Okay? The more liberal our society, the more resources we have, the more that we can share without losing our own, like mating opportunities or whatever, the less dangerous the world is, the less useful are those snap judgments. And so who is us and who is them becomes the most pressing question of our time, right? Groups who are trying to get you into an us-them dichotomy probably have nefarious objectives in the end. The more that we're free, the less useful those snap judgments are, because people don't really conform to those categories. So let's talk stereotype threat, or as labeled in the book, self-fulfilling prophecy, which we talked about before. let's take some school-age girls and divide them into two groups and give them a test. They're going to take the same test. But one group of girls, we're going to tell that girls do well on this sort of test. The other group are told that boys are better at math, implying that girls are worse at math than boys. And we give them both the same test. We didn't say that girls are bad at math. We said boys are better. That's important because we're not really talking self-fulfilling prophecy here. We're talking stereotype threat. Even saying something not about math, like girls like princess dresses, gonna get the same effect. Give both groups the same test, and the girls told that girls do well on this kind of test overperform. They beat the average. The other group underperforms. Whatever stereotype you've put in their head, whatever God, the word is right there. I had it and I lost it again. Anyway, whatever lens that you've set in front of them to look through, they underperform. The thing is, it takes mental energy to resist stereotypes. So Black people in white spaces might feel a lot of stereotype threat. They might think those white people, they might be right, are judging them on a category instead of as an individual. And so they're going to work really, really hard not to act like a stereotype, and are therefore going to make a lot of mistakes. Women in male spaces have a lot of pressure to not behave like a stereotyped woman, and therefore devoting mental energy, frontal lobe energy, to not acting like a stereotype, and therefore trip up. Men behave differently in female spaces. And eventually, if we ever get around to microaggressions, what is the stereotype that white people experience, particularly in non-white spaces? The stereotype that we're all racist. And trying really, really hard not to be racist, do we succeed? Backlash, punishing people who don't conform to gender roles. When this happens, it does happen. Specifically, we seem to be punishing agentic women in society more than communal men in society. That's just where the study is and where the data are. So that seems to contradict some other things that we've said. Both the things are true, and it's really about the focus of studies cited in this particular part of the chapter, workplace stuff. Okay, to some degree, we'll also punish communal men for not negotiating their salaries hard enough or asking for time off to care for kids. That kind of stuff gets in the way of your promotion opportunities. Do we want to change stereotypes? Probably. When they're wrong, we want to change stereotypes. Okay. So see above, representation matters. A big part of changing your stereotypes is not constantly presenting people with stereotypes in the media. Okay. But I'd also recommend, in your copious free time, you grab this YouTube video. It's a TED Talk, and TED hosts their own videos. I don't always have to send you to YouTube, but the TED site is just less reliable. It crashes more. It's glitchy and slower. So YouTube has the infrastructure, it's there. The guy is named Daryl Davis, and he's Black, and he sings the blues. He's a musician. He's not a social activist. But he started going to KKK rallies and like making friends one at a time with individual KKK members, and just like having relationships with them, having friendships, you know, going to their barbecues and having them to his barbecues, and essentially deprogramming them. A stereotype is this belief that a person has characteristics because they're a member of a group, because we perceive they're a member of a group. But people are individuals, and within group differences generally exceed between group differences. That is, Black people are more different from other Black people than they are from white people, and the same for white people. And so presenting people with individuals, it challenges the stereotypes, and eventually you just can't hold on to that stereotype anymore. It's got to go. And so people, they rationalize, and they keep thinking that the stereotype is mostly true, but it's not as true as it used to be. And it loses its virulence, and then they can't do the KKK thing anymore. And then they give Mr. Davis their KKK robes, and he's got a closet by now, just like full of the robes of ex-KKK members who've been deprogrammed and left the movement. So that's one way that you can change stereotypes, is keep presenting, stop presenting stereotypes to people through the mass media, through Disney movies and shit. You don't have to do that. You can do representation and inclusion. And the more you do representation and inclusion, the more that things change, sometimes fast, as in for gay rights. Gay marriage happened really fast from a credible movement with backing to going from 25% acceptance to 75% acceptance to it being the law of the land. That was snappy. Very, very fast. Also, in the presence of multiple categories, you get to pick. You're a woman, and you're a scientist. Oh, so once I know you as a scientist, I start to stereotype you as a scientist more than as a woman. For better or worse, that one. Do these change our reality? In other words, our assessments of reality? Of course, stereotypes don't change the objective truth of the matter, but do they change how we perceive situations? Well, absolutely. She hits well for a girl. Let's start there. This thing, yeah, more YouTube. Sorry, that's where videos are hosted, so that's where you're going. Dude, this is a commercial for feminine hygiene pads. I get it. I'm aware of the fact that it's a commercial for feminine hygiene pads. God, it's also really heavy. Like, maybe I'm just a sentimental old fool. I feel that way. But I cry every time I watch this thing. It's so good. So go have a look at that thing and, like, what does it mean to run like a girl? Just check it out. Anyway, external traits are objective and can be measured. How tall are you? How heavy are you? How strong are you? How much weight can you lift from the ground over your head? I can measure that. The internal stuff is really harder and has some shifting standards, right? So a lot of behavior, it's harder to, I guess behavior is external, but it's still harder to measure, and we kind of measure relatively instead of specifically. How many times does this person interrupt? Well, Donald Trump interrupted Hillary Clinton constantly. Hillary Clinton was taught to act in a masculine manner when engaging in debate. And so she interrupted Donald Trump instead of being a doormat. She interrupted Trump a lot less than Trump interrupted her, but she was called out for it and he was not, to the same degree. She interrupted a lot for a woman. He did not interrupt a lot for a man. Not in the 2016 debate. In the 2020 debate against Biden, he was actively trying to break that norm and just like not allow a conversation. So constant interruptions. Am I aggressive? I don't feel aggressive. I don't even feel particularly masculine. But would you tolerate the way I talk to you if I was female? I think you should. But honestly, women who act like me in the classroom get way more pushback from their students than I do. They're totally justified and they always win with administration. But they have to win with administration, and I don't. Am I a good writer for an autistic person? I write novels, and if you knew ahead of time I was autistic and you read my thing, you might go, that's really good for an autistic dude. It's not what I want. I want to be a good writer. I don't think of myself the majority of the time as an autistic person. I just am a writer, okay? So your stereotypes and your smearing of categories and stuff, it's really problematic. It changes your perceptions of reality. Okay, so we've done the affect and we've done the cognitions, and let's hit the B, which is the behavior. And the behavior is called discrimination. Sex type discrimination. So that would be treating people differently because of their sex, on the basis of sex. Hashtag Oscars so white. So this is women not being credited, not winning Oscars for directors, even for objectively better movies. Is it James Cameron doing the Avatar, and James Cameron's ex-wife, whose name I don't have in front of me, doing the war movie, an objectively better movie? It's not Stop Loss, it's the other one. It's God, I can't come up with it. Anyway, and he wins and she doesn't. And not just one case, but hundreds of cases. Oscars so white, no black people as best actor, no black people for scripts or direction or anything, even though there's lots of black movies made by black people and so on. So people start tuning out of this 2018 Oscars so white hashtag. But every year before it just wasn't hashtagged. And people start tuning out of the Academy Awards, the Oscars, because they're not in them. They're just not there. It's just the same old thing, It's Sean Penn winning the Academy Award for playing a person who experiences retardation, instead of getting someone with those experiences to be in the role. So the Academy brought on way more Academy members and made sure that they were black and female and trans and so on. And that's resulted in more diversity at the Academy Awards. But the Academy Awards are already sort of doomed to irrelevance. People are still tuning out. Doubt raiser comments. So you're headed to grad school. If you've had a couple classes with me and I know who you are and I have a record of papers I can refer to later, maybe you ask me for a grad school. I'm happy to write them, a grad school recommendation. Am I more likely to do a doubt raiser comment if you're female than if you're male? Well, this person doesn't have the best grades of any person, but they have X, Y, and Z. The literature really strongly suggests yes, that your male and female professors are more likely to include doubt raisers on your recommendations if you're female than if you're male. I know I've put a couple of doubt raisers in because I thought they were warranted. That if people are looking at the transcripts, they're going to see these lower grades. That you didn't get A's in my classes. So I want to address that. But maybe I should stop addressing it because I can't say categorically, right, who's getting those. And the data is really clear. Here at the school, we have a 24-hour policy. We're to respond to student emails within 24 business hours. So like not on weekends and holidays and whatever, over spring break or whatever, but 24 hours during business time. Um, why? Well, because sometimes people don't get responses, and you need to get responses. Um, so my personal policy is I respond to emails as soon as I see them, unless there's no action item for me, then I might not respond to it. Like you're telling me you're missing a thing because you're sick, but I don't care. I don't care if you miss a thing. You have grace on assignments till the end of the term. I'm not taking attendance in classes. I don't need an excuse from you. I'm busy. I have 7 classes and 140 students. That email is not informative and it's not necessary, and there's no action item for me because I don't need to excuse you from a class. I already did. So I probably won't respond to those. But if there's a thing and I have to respond or provide information, I do it right away. It's not an interruption. I'm checking the emails because I'm not doing another task. So I have time, and so I see it, and if I need more information, typically I'll reply, hang on while I get that information, then email someone else, get that reply, do the thing. Why? Because you deserve that. Everyone deserves that. Everyone deserves that equally. And because all of your professors, on average, respond faster to white male students than to anybody else. So if I'm making a decision who to respond to now and who to table until later, I don't see why I'd want to, but if I am, then I can't guarantee that I'm not doing so with some bias. The bias is present. It's not that your Black faculty respond more to Black students, it's that across the board, on average, white male students get responded to first. Don't want to do it. We have a list of reasons women leave STEM in college, right? Abandon the engineering track for some more stereotyped track. And they are in order. Number 1, that women have to prove their competence more than men have to prove their competence. Men get a pass on competence because it's according to type. Black women especially find themselves proving more competence than men have to prove. There's a role conflict that competent doesn't go with feminine in America. Should it? Different question. It doesn't. And so the need to stay feminine and stay competent at the same time is a constant drain. Man, you might be the only woman in calculus, and the men are there saying, with good intentions, you'd look nicer if you washed your hair more, or I like when you smile, or judging your clothing and stuff like that. Is it relevant to how good you are at calculus? That pressure to do both things drives people out. The maternal wall, the idea that mothers especially aren't competent. Mom brain, you do it to yourself, the mom brain that you talk about. And other people do it to you, more importantly. The queen bee problem. There are women in STEM, not a lot. Disproportionately not. But other women in STEM might be hostile. They might give you a hard time on your dissertation that they don't give to another man. They're treating you differently, harder, because you're a woman, instead of becoming a mentor and giving you some cover and making sure you have a seat at the table and call on you from that seat at the table. For reasons that they have a special and privileged position a little bit, maybe, that they fought for and carved out and don't want to see you get a free ride or whatever. I don't know. Don't want to be seen as doing special favors because that sex types them. oh, women stick together. So they treat you harder to avoid an appearance of favoritism or whatever it is, but it is in effect the queen bee effect. And then just plain harassment. All the time, every day, men commenting on your appearance and on and on and on. You're the only woman around, and so everyone wants to date you, and so on. Leadership starts at the top. Last point that I want to pull out of this chapter. Please read the chapter. There's lots more points in it. Last thing I want to pull out. Leadership starts at the top. So people endorse more sexism, men and women endorse more sexism when the boss is seen as sexist. Men and women call out sexism less when they see it, when they perceive their boss is sexist. And the day Trump took office, the KKK took off their hoods. So here's this phenomenon. What is it? The Tiki Torch riot. The guys marching, basically some University of Virginia students held a rally to protest there being a monument of some Confederate soldier or whatever. Some racist guy with a monument on horseback with sword raised, whatever. And they were campaigning to have it pulled out. It looks bad. It is bad. And the alt-right shows up. The guys previously would have been in the KKK, but now they don't have hoods and crosses and torches. They have tiki torches, and they're marching openly with their faces exposed, filming themselves. Filming, like we still use film. Cell phones out, like taking the selfies and posting them and and everyone else is recording the tiki torch thing. And of course that leads to the counter protest of the protest. They go there to instigate trouble and they get it, and it's violent. Good people on both sides like that. Why did they suddenly feel they had permission to take off their hoods, like there wouldn't be any social repercussions for that? Because leadership starts at the top. I don't know if you think Trump is a racist. I know that racists think Trump is a racist. They're on his team. And that goes all the way to the Capitol Hill riots that we just recently endured at the time of this recording. I was going to say filming again, but we don't use film. We record stuff now, Dr. D. That was just 12 days ago. It's really fresh. And so people should remember that the men and handful of women who stormed the Capitol and broke in to the Capitol building and went looking for Mike Pence and Nancy Pelosi and so on to hang them, did so recording themselves, live streaming to social media as though there would be no consequences, saying we were invited here by the president. And indeed, on the day of the event, left with no consequences, no arrests. Right, that day. They're getting tracked down and prosecuted now. Because leadership starts at the top. Maybe one day you're in the position of leadership. Maybe you're not in a position of leadership, but you know about that effect and are in a position to challenge leadership, to tell truth to power. But I'm not saying what you should do. You'll make your decision. So that's it. Happy chapter 3. Okay, bye.